MMA leaned against the kitchen counter, sipping her morning coffee as she glanced out the window. The sun was just starting to rise, casting a golden glow over the city. Her husband, Daniel, had already left for work, leaving her alone in their luxurious apartment. She sighed, feeling the familiar pang of loneliness that had been creeping into her life lately. That's when she saw him. A tall, muscular figure was unloading boxes from a moving truck parked outside the building next door. Emma's eyes lingered for a moment too long. He was young, probably in his mid-20s, with short dark hair that glistened in the sunlight. His fitted white tank top clung to his athletic frame, and his gray sweatpants hung just right, hinting at the strength beneath. New neighbor, she muttered to herself, trying to sound indifferent, but something about him caught her attention. Maybe it was the way he moved with such confidence, or the way his biceps flexed as he lifted a heavy box. Whatever it was, Emma couldn't look away. Later that day, she decided to take the trash out, something she usually left for Daniel. As she stepped into the hallway, she nearly collided with him. "Oh, sorry," he said, flashing a charming smile. "I'm Liam, just moved in next door." Emma felt her cheeks flush. "Emma," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Welcome to the building." "Thanks," he said, his eyes locking with hers for a moment longer than necessary. "I'm still getting settled, but if you need anything, just let me know." "I will," Emma said, her heart racing as she walked back to her apartment. Over the next few days, Emma found herself making excuses to bump into Liam. She'd accidentally leave her mail on the counter so she could check it when she knew he'd be coming home. She'd take the stairs instead of the elevator, hoping to catch him on his way up. And every time she saw him, that same electric feeling shot through her. One evening, as Emma was watering the plants on her balcony, she noticed Liam working out in his living room. The blinds were slightly open, giving her a clear view of him lifting weights, his muscles rippling with each movement. She felt a mix of guilt and excitement as she watched him, unable to tear her eyes away. The next morning, Emma decided to take things a step further. She knocked on Liam's door, pretending she needed help with a stuck window. "Hey, Emma," Liam said, opening the door with a smile. "What's up?" "Oh, I hate to bother you," she said, feigning helplessness, "but my window in the bedroom won't budge. I was wondering if you could take a look." "Sure thing," Liam said, grabbing a tool from his toolbox. As he followed her into the bedroom, Emma felt a rush of adrenaline. She watched as Liam effortlessly fixed the window, his biceps flexing as he worked. "All set," he said, turning to her with that same charming smile. "Thanks," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're a lifesaver." "Anytime," Liam replied, his eyes lingering on hers for a moment before he left. That night, Emma couldn't stop thinking about Liam. She knew it was wrong, but the attraction was undeniable. And as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to give in to the temptation. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that had taken hold of her since Liam fixed her window. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his smile, his muscles, the way he looked at her. It was intoxicating, and she knew she was playing with fire. But she couldn't stop herself. One afternoon, as Daniel was away on another business trip, Emma decided to take a chance. She knocked on Liam's door, holding a bottle of wine. "Hey, Emma," Liam said, opening the door with a surprised look. "What's up? I thought you might like some company," she said, holding up the bottle. "It's been a while since I've had someone to share a drink with." Liam hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come on in." Emma walked into his apartment, which was still mostly unpacked. Boxes were scattered around, but there was a cozy feel to the place. She sat down on the couch, and Liam joined her, pouring them each a glass of wine. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in months. Liam was easy to talk to, and there was something about the way he looked at her that made her feel alive. As the night went on, the conversation grew more intimate. Emma found herself opening up about her frustrations with Daniel, how he was always gone, how she felt like she was living in a gilded cage. "I get it," Liam said, his voice soft. "Sometimes, You just need someone to see you. Really see you. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She looked into his eyes. And for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Emma, Liam said, his voice barely above a whisper. She didn't know who moved first. But suddenly, they were kissing. It was passionate, desperate, like they were trying to make up for all the time they'd lost. Emma felt a surge of emotions she hadn't felt in years. But then, reality hit her. She pulled away, her breath ragged. I can't do this, she said, standing up. I'm married. Liam looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding. I know, he said, but you deserve to be happy. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She wanted to stay, to give in to the temptation. But she knew it was wrong. I should go, she said, grabbing her purse. Liam didn't try to stop her. He just watched as she walked out the door, a look of longing on his face. Emma spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, her mind racing. She knew she was on dangerous ground, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward Liam. The next day, she tried to distract herself with chores, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. She found herself checking her phone, hoping he'd text her. When her phone finally buzzed, her heart leapt. It was Liam. Hey, the message read, I'm sorry about last night. I didn't mean to make things complicated. Emma stared at the screen, unsure of how to respond. Finally, she typed, it's okay, I'm just confused. Me too, Liam replied, but I can't stop thinking about you. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. She knew she was playing with fire, but she couldn't bring herself to stop. Emma's heart raced as she stared at Liam's text. I can't stop thinking about you. The words echoed in her mind, pulling her deeper into a whirlwind of emotions she couldn't control. She knew she was crossing a line, but the temptation was too strong to resist. The next few days were a blur. Emma found herself texting Liam constantly, their conversations growing more flirtatious with each message. She'd catch herself smiling at her phone, her heart skipping a beat every time his name popped up on the screen. One evening, as Daniel was away on yet another business trip, Emma decided to take the plunge. She invited Liam over for dinner, telling herself it was just a friendly gesture. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Hey, Liam said, standing at her doorstep with a bottle of wine in hand. He looked effortlessly handsome in a simple black t-shirt and jeans. His short dark hair slightly messy, as if he'd just run his fingers through it. Hi, Emma replied, her voice trembling slightly. Come in. As they sat down to eat, the tension between them was palpable. They talked and laughed, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper, something unspoken. After dinner, they moved to the couch, the bottle of wine nearly empty. Emma felt a warmth spreading through her, a mix of the alcohol and the way Liam was looking at her. Emma, Liam said softly, his eyes locking with hers. I know this is complicated, but I can't pretend I don't feel something for you. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to say something, to tell him to stop, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she leaned in, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was both tender and desperate. This time, there was no pulling away. They gave in to the passion that had been building between them, their hands exploring each other's bodies as they moved to the bedroom. It was a night of raw emotion, of giving in to desires that had been suppressed for too long. Emma felt a mix of guilt and exhilaration. But in that moment, she didn't care. She was lost in the intensity of it all. The next morning, Emma woke up to find Liam still asleep beside her. She watched him for a moment, her heart aching with a mix of love and regret. She knew she had crossed a line, but she couldn't bring herself to feel sorry. As Liam stirred awake, he smiled at her, his eyes filled with warmth. Morning, he said, his voice soft. Morning, Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They lay there in silence for a while, the weight of what had happened hanging in the air. Finally, Liam spoke. What happens now? He asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Emma sighed, her mind racing. She didn't have an answer. All she knew was that she couldn't go back to the way things were. I don't know, she admitted, but I can't pretend this didn't happen. Liam nodded, his expression serious. I understand, he said. Whatever you decide, I'll be here. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She knew she was in deep. But she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Emma. She tried to act normal, to go about her daily routine as if nothing had changed. But every time she saw Liam, her heart would race, and the guilt would creep in. Daniel returned from his business trip, oblivious to the storm brewing in Emma's heart. He was his usual self, distant and preoccupied with work. Emma tried to reconnect with him, to find some semblance of the love they once shared. But it felt like trying to hold on to smoke. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Daniel finally noticed something was off. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice tinged with concern. "Is everything okay?" Emma hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this was her chance to come clean, to tell him the truth. But the words stuck in her throat. "I'm just tired," she said, forcing a smile. "Work's been stressful." Daniel nodded, but his eyes lingered on her, as if he could sense she was hiding something. The tension between them grew, and Emma found herself withdrawing more and more. She spent hours alone in her thoughts, torn between her feelings for Liam and the life she had built with Daniel. One afternoon, as Emma was leaving the grocery store, she ran into Liam. He looked as conflicted as she felt. His eyes filled with a mix of longing and regret. "Emma," he said, his voice soft, "we need to talk." They found a quiet spot in the park, the autumn leaves falling around them. The air was crisp, and the silence between them was heavy. "I can't keep doing this," Liam said, his voice breaking. "I care about you, Emma, but it's tearing me apart." Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. She knew he was right, but the thought of letting him go was unbearable. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I feel like I'm losing myself." Liam reached out, taking her hand in his. "You need to figure out what you want," he said, "but whatever you decide, I'll respect it." Emma nodded, her heart aching with the weight of his words. She knew she had to make a choice, but the thought of hurting either of them was paralyzing. That night, as she lay in bed beside Daniel, Emma finally made up her mind. She knew she couldn't keep living this double life, torn between two men. The next morning, she sat Daniel down, her heart pounding in her chest. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Daniel looked at her, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. "What's going on, Emma?" Emma took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I've been unfaithful," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Daniel stared at her, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. "How long?" he asked, his voice cold. "Not long," Emma replied, her voice breaking. "But it doesn't matter. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I never meant to hurt you." Daniel stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. "Who is it?" he demanded, his voice rising. Emma hesitated, but she knew she couldn't lie anymore. "Liam," she said, her voice barely audible. Daniel's face turned red with anger. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Emma sat there, tears streaming down her face. She knew she had shattered their marriage, but she also knew it was the only way to start healing. The days that followed Emma's confession were a blur of anger, tears, and silence. Daniel moved out of the house, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts and the crushing weight of her guilt. The home they had built together now felt hollow, a stark reminder of the life she had shattered. Emma tried to reach out to Daniel, to explain, to apologize, but he refused to speak to her. His anger was a wall she couldn't penetrate, and with each unanswered call or text, she felt the finality of their relationship sinking in. Meanwhile, Liam kept his distance, respecting Emma's need for space. But his absence only added to her loneliness. She found herself caught between the pain of losing Daniel and the longing for Liam. A limbo that left her feeling more lost than ever. One evening, Emma received a letter from Daniel's lawyer. It was a draft of the divorce papers. As she read through the cold, legal language, the reality of her situation hit her like a ton of bricks. Their marriage was over, and there was no going back. Emma sat on the couch, the papers in her hands, tears streaming down her face. She thought about the life they had built together, the dreams they had shared, and how easily it had all fallen apart. The next day, Emma decided to meet with Liam. She needed closure, to finally confront the choices she had made and the consequences they had brought. They met at a quiet cafe, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Liam looked at her with concern, his eyes filled with a mix of love and regret. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice soft. Emma shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "Not great," she admitted. Daniel filed for divorce. Liam reached out, taking her hand in his. "I'm so sorry, Emma," he said. "I never wanted this to happen." Emma looked at him, her heart aching with the weight of her emotions. "I know," she said, "but it did, and now I have to figure out how to move on." Liam nodded, his expression serious. "Whatever you need, I'm here for you," he said. Emma felt a surge of gratitude, but also a deep sadness. She knew she couldn't lean on Liam. Not after everything that had happened. "I think I need to figure this out on my own," she said, her voice trembling. Liam's eyes filled with sadness, but he nodded in understanding. "I get it," he said. "Just know that I care about you. Emma, always will." Emma felt tears streaming down her face as she squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. As they parted ways, Emma felt a strange sense of relief. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew she had to face it alone. The next few months were a journey of self-discovery for Emma. She threw herself into her work, finding solace in the routine and the distraction it provided. She started therapy, working through her guilt and the pain of her failed marriage. Slowly, she began to rebuild her life. Piece by piece, she reconnected with old friends, rediscovered hobbies she had neglected, and learned to find joy in the little things. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. She knew she had made mistakes, but she also knew she had grown from them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma whispered a silent goodbye to the life she had lost and the love she had left behind. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it, one step at a time.